Today we're going to talk about a sermon, we're going to talk about a text that you might not automatically tie in with Thanksgiving. We'll see if I can do it. We're going to look at the third chapter of Exodus. I don't know why it took me so long to arrive at this insight that I mentioned a few weeks ago, and that is that the Bible is nothing but a series of stories, one after the other, which tell us who we are, who we've been, and who we want to become. That's been such a powerful insight for me, and it's a new insight. And I think if we were to kind of catalog all of the stories in the Old Testament and say, what are the 20 most important stories? This would make that list easily. This third chapter of Exodus. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. Moses looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burned up. And when the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush. He said, Moses, Moses. And Moses replied, Here I am. And God said, Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He further said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. You know, ordinarily when I come to one of these listings of people like that, I don't even try to read it. I think I got this one right, but it was a rare occasion. I oftentimes say, don't even try pronouncing all of these. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppress them. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Remember that line. And then he said, I will be with you. God said, I will be with you, and this shall be the sign that you have that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain. And Moses said to God, If I come to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. He then said further, Thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, Thus you shall say to the Israelites, The Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my title for all generations. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I was with a group of clergy colleagues the other day. We were sitting around talking, and then I ventured to say this. This is not good news, but I've thought about this. After 40 years, I've come to this conclusion. It's not good news, but it is the truth. You can't get more arrogant or egotistic than to become a preacher. I said, stop and think about this. How arrogant or egotistic would you have to be in order to walk into a room of several hundred people and say, I've come here to tell you about God? It's the truth. It's the reason I think that most of us resist the call to the preaching part of ministry. And so when we stop and think about this, we know that Moses had it right. This extraordinary story where God comes to Moses and there's a burning bush, but it is not consumed. I mean, this is clearly one of those remarkable holy moments, a transcendent moment, if you will, where heaven comes to earth. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. And God says to Moses, look, I'm calling you to ministry. I'm calling you to be a prophet. I'm calling you to go to Egypt and to liberate my people. And Moses says, you got to be kidding. You got to be kidding. And we understand completely why Moses would say that, because we know the story. At least maybe some of you know part of the story. I recommend to you, these old, wonderful Old Testament stories that maybe you've forgotten, you haven't gone back and read them. If the Bible's intimidating to you, go to the bookstore and get one of these children's Bible story books. I'm not kidding. They're great. Now, I'm not saying that's where I do my research. But I am saying that if the story is intimidating, if the Bible's intimidating, go get one of these children's Bible story books. They'll tell these stories. It's a wonderful story. And so you may remember some or part, maybe even all of this story. Moses was born in Egypt. He was born to a slave girl who was a part of the holy family, or the royal family, I should say. And there was a decree that they were going to kill all of the Hebrew boys under the age of 2. And so they hid him. They put him in a little canoe. I call it a little canoe, little boat. Hid him in the reeds of the river. And he was saved, and he grew to stature and to prominence in Egypt. And then you may have forgotten this part. Moses has a confrontation with an Egyptian. And Moses loses his temper, and he kills him. He kills the Egyptian, and he is a murderer. And so you can imagine the reaction of Moses. He's standing there in this very holy place, this holy moment. God says, look, take your sandals off because this place is so holy. And God calls him to go back to Egypt. He says, God, what are you talking about? Have you forgotten that in every little town in Egypt, in every little post office, in every little town, there is a poster with my picture on it? And it says, wanted, dead or alive. What do you mean that you are calling me not only to speak for you, but to go back to Egypt to do so? And God makes him this promise. He says, look, I promise you I'll be with you all the way. And then Moses asks this extraordinary question. He says, if I decide to do this, what will I say to them when they ask me, what is the name of the God who sent you to us? We understand that question, don't we? It's a perfectly legitimate question, and we understand it even in our age because we know that there are gods chasing us all of the time. From the moment you get up on Monday morning, 5:36, 7:30, whenever it is, till the moment you go to bed Saturday night, you know the gods of this world are chasing you all the time. Telling you who you should be, what you should like, what you should pursue, telling you what it is that you should worship. Every once in a while on Sunday mornings, I'll stop at the McDonald's across the street here, across Parker, and I'll pull in early on 7:30, 8 o'clock on Sunday morning and get a cup of coffee and a sausage biscuit or a bacon biscuit. And I've got to tell you, they're so nice over there. I just love them, but it is always irritating to me. And you know why? When you drive by those little boxes that speak to you, they always come on and say, would you like such and such this morning? And I always think how arrogant it is of them to think that they know what it is that I want. So here's my standard thing. They'll say, do you want our new croissant sandwich this morning? And I generally just say no. And I wait for this awkward silence till they beg me, to tell me what I really do want. 3 or 4 Sundays ago, I drove by, and I think I was more irritable than usual, and I pulled up to the little box, and they said, would you like our new peppermint mocha today? And I said, look, I'm just curious about this. Have you ever sold anything this way? Have you ever sold anything this way? It's emblematic of our culture, though, isn't it? The culture in which we live, in which everybody is trying to tell us something, trying to sell us something, tell us which gods we should follow. And so we've got the gods that beckon us all week long. For instance, there's the God of success. The God that says, if you're going to be successful, and you must be, and believe me, in this city, we know about this God, don't we? If you're going to be successful, and you have to make this much money. You need to drive this kind of car. You need to wear these clothes. You need to live in this neighborhood. You need to belong to this club. You need to have these friends. The God of success. And then there is the God of ideology. The God of ideology. We know exactly what the truth is, regardless of what anybody else says. So let me just say this to you. The election has passed us. I know that most of you believe that most of the people that are in this church with you believe exactly the same thing you do. We make that mistake, don't we? You think the people in this church, the people in this town believe the same thing that you do. Let me tell you, it's not true. In this church, and it's pretty, I think, emblematic of the entire city, there are people on the very far, far left and people on the very far, far right, and everything in between, with most people kind of bunched up in the middle, right? And we'd like to believe that there's some kind of ideological truth out there, and that could be our God, and we can follow it, and that will be the answer to all of our problems, but it just isn't true. There's the God of fame and social success. Not too long before he left our staff to go start a new church, Abe Smith was our youth minister, and a lot of you know Abe. And he and I were having this conversation, and I don't remember how we got to this particular discussion, but at some point I said, Abe, tell me about today's generation of youth. And I don't know that he was talking about our youth and our youth choir or our youth program per se, but I think he was talking generally. I said, what is it that's most important to this generation of youth? He said, without a question, it is fame. It's not money, it's not success, it is fame. And he said the reason is that's what they see all the time around them. On social media, in the newspaper, on TV. You know, there are these TV shows that are dedicated to famous people. And it doesn't make any difference what you're famous for. Whatever you do that's provocative, that gets you into the headlines is good enough. So you might be famous for checking into rehab. In all seriousness, I mean, there are all sorts of things that will make a person fame. And he said what our youth want more than anything else is fame. And right along with that is social success. Being popular. You know, it was always an issue. It was an issue for me when I was young. It was an issue, if you might. It was an issue for you when you were young. We all want to be popular, isn't it? But it's all changed now with Facebook. Now, I think you all know I have my own personal Facebook account. The main difference is that I don't know how to log into it. I have never logged into it. And I, therefore, have been spared the pain of knowing how many friends I do not have. Now, I guess Kim Hills, the choir's not even there. They've all done their deal. I'm not talking to you all anymore. I'm going to focus all of my attention out here on the congregation. Traitors. I think that Kim Hill and some of the communication people, they know how to log into my Facebook, and they unfortunately know how many friends I do have and do not have. They've been gracious enough not to tell me. But I was reading the other day, maybe some of you saw this article in Newsweek. It was written by a mother-daughter team. The daughter is probably in her mid-upper 20s, very successful young woman. And they were talking about the pluses and minuses of Facebook. And this daughter is so candid. She says, you know, in so many ways, Facebook is such a wonderful way to communicate with one another and to expand your social network and so forth. But she said it can be painful because you can be out eating at a really nice restaurant with some of your very best friends, and then you got your iPhone and you log into Facebook, and you see, all of a sudden you see some friends and there's a picture dated 5 minutes ago, and it's a barbecue, and you say, is that a barbecue? Are those my friends that are there? How come I wasn't invited to that barbecue? She said it's a real issue because you start focusing on all of the places you think you should be in order to be popular, the ones that you should be with, rather than enjoying the friends that you do have. And so I could go on and on this morning talking about all those gods. You know who they are. All those gods that chase us every week, Monday through Saturday. And so we understand the question when Moses asked God, "Who shall I say is the name of the God who sent me?" Because by the time we get here on a Sunday morning, we are so sick and tired of being chased by these gods who have lied to us about the meaning of life. And God gives him this answer. It's one of the most cryptic lines in the entire Bible. Cryptic, meaning indecipherable lines. God says, "Tell them that I am sent you. That I am who I am." And let me tell you this. You can get out your Bible commentaries and your Hebrew to English translations and so forth, and you can try to figure out what that means. I'll just tell you what I think it meant. I think it meant, I'm not telling you what my name is. You tell them that only when they are in relationship with me, when they walk with me, when they trust me, only then will they know who I am. The mystery of my love for them, my grace in their lives, my power for who they can be. Only when they come into a relationship with me will they know who I am. I wonder if you remember the first time you fell in love. Not puppy love. I'm talking about the real thing. You'd read about love all of your life. You'd read poems about love. There are times in which you maybe thought you understood something about romantic love. You'd heard thousands and thousands and thousands of songs about love. And then all of a sudden you meet this other special person and it's different. And you find yourself being sucked into this vortex of feelings that transcend anything you have ever experienced. And suddenly you know something about love for which there are no words. And maybe you even discover in that experience a God that you cannot name. I wonder if you remember the first time you stood on the rim of the Grand Canyon. Your friends and neighbors had told you about the Grand Canyon. They told you how extraordinary it was. They had told you there were no words to explain it. You had looked at all of Ansel Adams' pictures, but in spite of the brilliance of this wonderful photographer, when you finally stand on the rim of the Grand Canyon, you suddenly get it. There are no words. There are no pictures which can describe to you the incomprehensible majesty of this place. And your mind flashes back almost instantaneously, almost against your will, to Genesis, first chapter, first verse. Out of nothing, God created. And you think, if there is ever a time when I didn't believe in God, it is not now, because no being less than God could create a sight as mysterious and powerful and wonderful as this. And suddenly you realize that this is an experience for which there are no words, created by God, for which you have no name. This might not apply to all of you, because I know who my pilot friends are out there, but I wonder if you remember the first time that you took a ride in a small airplane. I remember so well. I was 14 years old. Little single-engine Cessna. I was sitting in the passenger seat, and we took off down the runway. And I remember the sensation being so much different from what I expected it to be, because I expected to have this sensation of flying. But I looked down, and instead I had the sensation of the earth falling away from me. And then suddenly there I was, and surrounded by this ocean of blue. And I felt as if I could reach out and touch the clouds. And it was just such an extraordinary and powerful and mysterious moment. To this day, I have no words for it. I wonder if you remember the first time you laid eyes on your baby. You'd been thinking about it. You'd been planning it. 8, 9 months. You'd felt the baby grow in your belly. You'd seen it grow in the belly of the one that you love. And you thought as that belly grew, your love for this child grew, and you thought you understood it. And then all of a sudden, that baby is here, and you look into its blue eyes. And you know something about the power and mystery and love of God that you never understood before. And this word, miracle, pops into your head. And you know that it's true. And you've had an experience for which there are no words, and you try to think a God for which there is no name. I don't know about you, but sometimes on Monday mornings, I get up early and I find myself driving to work, getting ready to fend off all the gods that will chase me during that week. And I'll look back on Sunday morning and I will be so grateful for the experience of touching the bread or taking the cup or touching a hand or saying a prayer or part of the liturgy or singing a song. I'll be so grateful for an experience of a God that I cannot name. And let me tell you this. Thanksgiving is not when we sit down to give thanks for what I call the 3 F's. Football, family, food. Not that those aren't important. Thanksgiving is what happens when we turn our back on all of those other gods to give thanks to a God whose love and power and mystery and grace are so powerful that we have no name.